Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Why Disaster Recovery Alone Won't Protect You If You Are Hacked. We're happy to be hosting this webinar this morning with Dell Technologies and Index Engines. Today, we are joined by Michael Tannenhouse, the CEO of Mavenspire, who will be facilitating this Fireside chat. And we also have David Finley, the Director of Cyber Recovery Strategy from Dell Technologies, and Jim McGann, Vice President of Marketing and Business Development at Index Engines. And now I will hand this over to Michael Tannenhouse.
Thanks, Jen. I appreciate it. And Jim and David, thank you so much for taking the time this morning.
Thank you. Good. Thank you.
So I wanted to start in this conversation on something really simple that I think is not necessarily simple for the rest of the population. I think that IT culture has been built up where the safety of backup is enhanced by disaster recovery, and that is the top of the food chain. And this morning we're talking about something different, cyber recovery, CR. And so I thought we would start our conversation around what is the difference between disaster recovery and cyber recovery. David, to you, if you had to sum it up in a sentence, what is the, you're obviously steeped in this stuff, what is the main difference between disaster recovery and cyber recovery?
I spend a lot of time on this with our customers around the world, and really the main difference is with disaster recovery, you have a paradigm or an architecture where you're copying either asynchronously or synchronously from one location to another for failover, fail back. You copy to a warm site, you copy to a hot site, you may do bi-directional copies, those kinds of things. The idea is you can more quickly recover from a disaster event, fire, flood, tornado, hurricane, natural disaster, or even, sometimes a fat-fingered person in IT that manages to mess some things up, which that is a lot more rare than the other things. But, the reality is cyber recovery is different because cyber recovery, if for instance, if you look at the guidance recently from the FDIC, to the member banks. They told the banks, they said, hey, what you've been doing for disaster recovery and copying things to disaster recovery sites, right, in order to fail over and fail back, that's absolutely what you need to do. But you must realize that when you copy these things, you could very well be copying malware to your DR site, and you could be infected in both sites. So that's the real difference there, is that you have the wide open pipe, you have malware that could be copied to the disaster recovery site, you could be infected or affected in each location. You could, for instance, have backups in production that were encrypted or deleted, and then the malware gets to that disaster recovery, and they too are deleted or encrypted. In which case you have no mechanism to recover unless you have a third copy isolated somewhere else. So cyber recovery gives us the ability to recover after a cyber event because the key information, sometimes all the information, is kept inside a cyber vault in a way that it's secure, it's offline. From us, it's behind an air gap. It's clean, we cleanse it, and we know it's clean, as Jim will tell you about when it comes to cleaning the data. We clean it with CyberSense, cyber analytics software, to make sure it's clean, and it's rapidly restorable after a cyber event. Cyber recovery, for instance, the gear, the hardware built around our data domain, right, and the software that runs it all, running on a server, probably would exist right in the same production data center with the data that we're protecting.
Well, that's an interesting point. So you're talking about how disaster recovery was, I used to joke that it's the meteorite scenario, right? Disaster recovery was made so that if your production facility gets slammed by a meteorite, you have somewhere to go, somewhere to restore over to. And you were just saying that the cyber recovery facility is generally in the production data center. It's not about meteors, at least not the, you know, astrological kind. It's about the cyber threat kind. And so that makes me wonder, Jim, you know, in your travels, you know, obviously as a maker of a analytics software that is looking for bad behavior in data, is there a rhyme or reason to what industries need to be looking for this stuff? Is it everywhere? Is it only the FDIC customers that care? What do you think?
No, I mean, the cyber criminals really don't discriminate against different industries. We've seen a range of attacks in Texas and Louisiana against, you know, small regional school systems. And as David can tell you, David's been involved with these, you know, we see school systems that have cyber recovery, cyber sense vaults in, you know, in a closet in the IT department. So it's, you know, you can get a very small footprint, and we have customers that are checking the integrity of data that amount to, you know, about a terabyte. And then we have customers that are using the same platform. And that's the beauty of the data domain environment, is it scales from very entry level. So you can get a small regional school system or healthcare organization or local government to deploy this in a cost-effective manner, as well as we have global, you know, financial services firms. So, you know, I think the cyber criminals are going after everyone. I mean, if you follow the news, you'll see state governments and you'll see local school systems being attacked, and a lot of them you don't hear about because they don't need to publish it. But it's just the spectrum of customers.
It was interesting. I recently read that one of the things that makes ransomware sort of a new beastie in the security world is that it became big business. People joke about it being the next or the current organized crime. I think I read yesterday that it has moved from a couple $100 million to a $6 trillion commercial industry. So think about that for a moment. The criminals are making $6 trillion a year on actually attacking and getting people to pay up. In fact, the new innovation coming from that universe, as I was reading yesterday, a white paper on it, is that once you pay them the ransom and they decrypt your data, they offer you protection for money from future attacks. Like you can buy protection money, like hush money on it. And you know, what do you think, gentlemen, both of you, it means that when something reaches a $6 trillion industry, do we think that it's going to go away? Do we think it's going to get big? Do we think it's going to burn itself out? What do we think?
You know, part of what we see is that there are different mechanisms driving that huge multi-trillion-dollar industry. Right, just today it was released that we've got new code coming out of Korea, right, North Korea, that essentially was once again fostered by our friends that launched the stuff from Lazarus Group years ago against Sony. So we have the nation state aspect. You know, just recently we had a major attack here in the United States that we won't go into who it was against, but the name is well known. And just recently this morning, it was announced that the leader of Evil Corp, which is located in Russia, multimillionaire, because he basically and his guys get together and write this code, and that's how they make their livings, right? We've indicted them, right? And do you think Michael will ever actually get them? Probably not.
No.
So nation state, organized crime, countries that won't extradite their people to us are all driving that business, right? It's not going to get better, Jim. I think it's going to get worse. What do you think?
No, it's clearly getting worse. I mean, if you look at some of the attacks that occurred last year, the thing that's changing is they're becoming more and more sophisticated. So, you know, whether it's coming from Russia or North Korea, the attacks that used to just basically get inside the data center and just wreak havoc, now they're dwell time and they're getting in there, looking at the environment, understanding what backup software is being used so they can maximize their damage. They're going in there and they're grabbing sensitive content and publishing it out on the web and threatening, you know, it'll turn cybercrime into a data breach. And we know with some of the regulations that are out there now, companies could face serious fines, even though it's, you know, it's not their fault, but in a sense it is. So I think, there is big money, and when there's money being made, and there's really difficult to enforce, where these attacks are coming from, North Korea, Russia, other locations, it's not going away. I mean, it's going to get worse, much, much worse.
So let me pause there just to let all the attendees know, we're having this casual fireside chat, but we still need your input. So if you have questions, there are people watching the Q&A area for you to be able to put questions there. We'd love to have people tell us what they think or what they want to know about. You put 3 experts in the room to talk through one of their favorite subjects, and we could go on for a really long time. So it's okay to interrupt us and ask us to be a little more specific. But let me change the angle just a little bit for a second. I talk to a lot of clients, and I am myself guilty of this for many years. So I want to put this out there. When you're talking about having disaster recovery, you're talking about having a second copy of your data. And many products out there, including those from Dell EMC and from others, have a mechanism to lock and make data not modifiable, right? You can store to the cloud, and you can set timers, and you can basically lock the stuff down so that people can't do it. People joke about the 2 nuclear key option to be able to change data. Can you tell me why we should be paying attention to cyber recovery in a world where features like that exist? And I'm going to turn to David on this one, since he's the one, it's weird. The people that are really in the security industry, having lunch with them is always really anxiety provoking for me. I've done it with a number of very famous professionals who weren't always the protectors. And in each case, I have always noticed they ask for things like your credit card at the end, just to see if you'll give it to them or if you were really listening to them over lunch. David's one of the protectors, but still having lunch with him can be very anxiety provoking. So I'm really setting up this question, waiting to see if his answer generates as much anxiety for the rest of you as it did for me the first time I asked him this question. So with that much lead up, there you go, David.
That's awesome, Michael. So hopefully I won't create as much anxiety, but we'll see. A couple of things that kind of dovetail into your question. One is, if we go back to what the attacks are that we're seeing a lot of lately, we're seeing an increased social engineering component, right? We're seeing them harvesting credentials, stealing credentials. And when it comes to stealing credentials, we're talking about your IT shop, and all of a sudden the bad guys have your sysadmin credentials. And they not only have it for one of your sysadmins, they have it for all of your admins. Now, how do they get those credentials, right? So we're seeing a lot more of that lately. So the notion of immutability and data being safe because we make a worm level copy, I think really gives folks a false sense of security, because it doesn't matter whose immutability it actually is. And I'll tell you a little bit about how ours works. But the idea is, if you have production level devices that people gain sysadmin privileges to, there are other ways to destroy the information on those devices than simply erasing what's supposedly an immutable copy. If you have that level of access, what about disbanding raid groups and wiping out LUNs at the hardware level, right? What about if you did that and those kinds of things, right? Could you do it on multiple machines? And the answer is yes, you could. So immutability it protects us against somebody issuing an erase command, a delete command, I'm going to change the data command, those kinds of things, but it doesn't protect against all things. Now, from our perspective, what we want to do and what we do is we put that immutable copy on the other side of a air gap to where it's offline 99% of the time anyway, so you can't get there. So that in itself is another security control, right? And the fact that it's offline most of the time, it'd be really difficult for the bad guys to find it. If they did find it for some reason, right? They really, again, they can't delete it, erase it, destroy it, that kind of thing, because we do add immutability. We also add the notion of you have to have 2 credentialed individuals at the same time to access our data, right? And that really is an extra level of protection against it. What we also see, Michael, is that there's this notion nowadays of what's called an NTP exploit. So here's, if you can imagine, here's how it works. We take the data, your key data, and we put it in a location that is, you know, it could be in a DR center, it could be in the cloud, it could be somewhere like that. But it's not vault protected, not air gap protected, it's accessible, right? And the bad guys launch what's called an NTP exploit, and they exploit by changing the clock values. They can write to the APIs for the provider. They can change the clock value and tell basically your instances and your, you know, if you will, and your data that it is next week rather than today, in which case your locks may expire on your data and the data can be erased or deleted or corrupted. So the message in all of that is there's always, these guys are always thinking of multiple ways to do this kind of a thing, right? I mean, if you want to research something that's even more fun, Michael, take a look at GPS exploits. They're actually exploiting and writing code to exploit GPS. So one of the things that we do in our cyber vault is we'll put in we used to at least, we put in an antenna that actually functioned as a GPS antenna to get time services, because we didn't want to connect to the internet to get NTP, you know, from the internet. So, or outside the vault. So we'd use a secure way, we thought, to getting time services. Now they're launching code to defeat GPS. So it always changes. It's getting worse at every turn from what we see.
I think the classic definition of the malicious hacker is that, you know, we build new walls, they figure out new ways to scale, go around or go under. And so I guess what you're describing is that castle wall that we all assumed was sort of the great way of doing things, a second copy. You know, they've had some time to think about it. So now they've started to come up with the ways to defeat the second copy. And, you know, one of the things that struck me about that is if you successfully defend from a ransomware attack, that doesn't make you safe. It actually might make you a bigger target because they've learned how you did it. So now the next time when they come, they know what you did the first time, and so they'll go for that first. So that, again, thank you so much. My anxiety is actually pretty good right now. So Jim, I had a question for you. How do you know, I mean, I know you're an analytics guy, I know you're going to tell us all about it, but how do you know if you already have a problem? If they're actually coming and they're actually doing some stealthy operations to collect data now, how do you find out about that? And what do you do about it? And how do you clean it up so that you can actually recover?
Yeah, so we've done a lot of work with Dell to integrate our CyberSense analytics into the product. So what Dell, the Cyber Recovery Vault, takes care of is getting the data in an isolated vault environment, and then hands off the data to CyberSense to look inside the files and the databases for pieces of evidence of corruption. So CyberSense is not necessarily a replacement for any real-time security solutions or malware detectors or so on. What it is, it's looking for the evidence. So it's really the last line of defense, saying, hey, we know that our firewalls and so on are not going to be 100%. So tell me when the data starts being corrupted, so I know when this happens. You know, places that have been attacked, you know, data's been corrupted over many months or weeks, and the earlier you know, the more you can react to it. So what CyberSense does is look at the data in the backup image, so it doesn't rehydrate the data, which is an important aspect. Doesn't allow the malware to expand any further or take any more destruction or corruption across the data set. Inside the backup image, whether it be Networker, Avamar, PowerProtect Data Manager, or other brands that are out there, and it'll look for signs of encryption, signs of data corruption, and so on. And an important aspect of CyberSense is that it's looking inside the content, because what the conversation here is talking about very smart technologists that are terrorists out there that are using the advanced capabilities to really go under the covers. So the simple types of attacks of corrupting data, like changing the extension to .lol or .encrypted or .loki, those days are going away. You know, those are easy to detect, and they know that, and they're seeing that. So they're upping their game, and they're going inside the files, inside databases, and hiding their corruption. We've seen attacks where inside of a Word document they encrypt the content, and they force the file extension to remain the same. Those are very difficult to attack, and there's metadata only analytics that will miss that. CyberSense looks inside and looks for those signs of corruption, and then feeds that to machine learning algorithms that have been trained on the types of attack vectors to give you basically a red light, green light. So when cyber recovery pushes data into the vault and this data is scanned, if it looks based on this observation, comparing it to previous observation, looks okay, it says, hey, everything's okay, go about your normal business. If it looks like there's signs of corruption, whether it be on 5 files or thousands of files, it feeds that back to cyber recovery and says, hey, send out an alert. It looks like we need to diagnose this. So it really does all the inspection of the data to check the integrity and make sure that the quality is there. And if you do need to recover, that what's inside the vault has integrity, and you can sleep well at night knowing that it's a good copy.
I had heard, and I remember this, and of course technology recycles, right? So we have the same issues that come back. I remember with the next generation firewalls, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, a lot of very big brands got kind of busted because they were taking a shortcut, and they were just scanning some of the data because they just didn't have the CPU and memory on those devices to really do the whole job. And so eventually the hackers sort of figured it out. They were only scanning, I think, the first 54 bytes or something like that. And so they didn't start writing malware to the 56 byte. So everyone was passing it through. And only a few of the products on the market actually looked at every little bit of the data. I remember you saying something once to me in passing that CyberSense was a lot like that too. It was about not just looking at some of the privy, but all the content. Did I understand that? Is that right?
No, that's an important feature. There's a popular backup software that's out there today that does metadata only analytics on premise, because you're exactly right. It's a horsepower issue. They don't have the horsepower and the processing capability to look inside every file. So what they do is they do a first pass looking at metadata only, looking for obvious signs, which are changes of extensions, rapid change in file size, for example. And then anything that they suspect is corrupt, they move it out to the cloud where they have the processing horsepower. So that workflow is incredibly flawed for many reasons, because they're going to miss a lot of data and get a lot of false negatives. And false negatives and false positives are really what cybersecurity professionals don't want to deal with, because then they lose confidence in the system. So the fact that CyberSense on the first pass in the cyber recovery vault without moving it out to the cloud is looking inside every file. So we have seen cyber criminals just get smarter and smarter. And if they say, hey, we're going to go and change the file extension to .encrypted, hey, and ask for a ransom, and if the customer, the victim comes back and says, hey, no, we're good, they'll say, hey, that didn't work. Let's up our game and move to more sophisticated approaches. And you're exactly right. So they're going to change their game, change the approach, and they're going to target people with more sophisticated content-based encryption that's hidden. So I think it's important for customers to compare what's on the market today, and even with the firewalls, to know that they will be circumvented. Some of the attacks that we're seeing, I mean, David speaks about this all the time, where they're embedding, the ransomware inside virtual images inside the data center that go uncovered. So, I mean, I don't think you can prepare for what they're doing because they're going to constantly change. I think you need to look at the data, check the integrity constantly, and have the confidence that your data is clean, because the data is your lifeblood of your company. And once that gets corrupted, you're out of business. And we've seen companies spend 6 months, getting their business operational again. How much would that cost you?
Potentially everything, right? You could go out of business.
It could.
It's actually interesting. I think that depending on who you are in a company, somebody successfully attacking you, whether they're breaking into your building physically or in a cyber kind of way, can sometimes be seen as like a mark of shame. So I wonder, and I do remember, David, you saying something about this in the past, how many people really report this stuff? And I'm starting to think through, if you have a growth industry in terms of the profits going way, way up, I've seen people talk about, since the pandemic has sent everybody working from home, the rise in attacks or malicious actors is like 4,000% or something like that. But I sort of wonder about the reverse side of that, how much of this goes unreported and how much goes into that in terms of setting kind of a low bar that everybody believes they need to come up to, right? I think, David, didn't you once say to me that, what was it, like a low percent, like 5% or whatever is
Yep.
what we see, and we set our bar based on the 5%. Is that right?
Yep, you're right. So, you know, it's interesting, Michael, because when we do this and our teams do this around the world, we have the benefit of hearing and seeing and talking to our customers about this. So that gives us more visibility. Granted, we don't have ultimate visibility, but we have greater visibility than the average business owner or IT fellow or person within a company. And that's good, right? So what we're able to do in the last probably year and a half is basically poll probably nearly 750 to 1,000 customers in the last 2 years. And one of the key questions we always ask wherever we go is, what percentage, is it 5% or 95% of the cyber events that happen in your particular city do you believe you hear about? I just asked some folks from Arizona a company from Arizona that yesterday. And they gave me the same answer that they all give me. It's 5% or less that they hear about, right? So the key to that is that it's not the fact that we're not hearing about all of these. There's reasons for that. In the United States, the reason for that is we don't have to report anything by law unless it's high-tech HIPAA or SEC, right, type related violations for financial institutions. In general, it doesn't have to be reported. If it hits the press, as far as we're concerned, it's a bad thing, right? So that's one reason it doesn't really get reported and why we only hear about 5%. But the thing to take away from this really is, if you only hear about 5% and you don't make a job out of every day studying what's really going on out there, then you're probably going to create, even within yourself or within your company, a false sense of security. In other words, you don't know what you don't know. And that's a dangerous place to be, right? So a lot of us don't know that the latest rendition from our North Korean friends is VHD. A lot of us don't know that Wasted Blocker really hit hard the last few weeks. A lot of folks don't know that they use Cobalt Strike to move laterally multiple large billion-dollar companies in the last 2 weeks. And most of us don't know that RAIC, whatever you want to call it, used against government entities and school systems was enormously successful, along with Soda Nakobe, right? If you don't do this for a living, you don't think about those things, right? Michael, you do, Jim does, I do, but if you're running an IT organization, that's not something you do every day, right? So the message there is, again, that we need to understand that there's a lot more of this going on around us than we ever think. You know, one of the most, I have to say honestly, one of the most frustrating things for me in talking with folks around, and quite frankly around the world, is that when I walk away and I tell them, you know, you can add a control to your environment where we cyber vault important information, we scrub it and make sure it's clean with CyberSense. At the end of the day, you can sleep knowing that nobody's ever been able to penetrate our vault. You've always been able to get the data out. And then, you know, the frustrating part to me is those folks that believe, they honestly believe, and bless their hearts, they believe that they can't be compromised. Jim, you ever run into anybody like that believe they can't be compromised?
Yeah, I mean, one of the, you know, the stats that I hear often is, you know, very large organizations have 75 different security applications running. And, you know, a lot of times when you speak with them, they're like, you know, if we can't survive with 75 different security applications, then we're in trouble. And you start asking the hard questions, is like, would you be able to stand up in front of your board of directors or your management team and say, we're 100% covered? And they all start squirming, and, you know, no one's going to say yes to that. You know, I think, you know, organizations need help. And, you know, I was at a conference, you know, speaking a couple of months ago, and it was all regional regional government organizations. And, one of the gentlemen there raised his hand and started talking about, because I mentioned, data corruption, changing extensions to .encrypted, and he raised his hand and goes, that happened to us last month. They corrupted a bunch of files, all the extensions were changed to .encrypted. And I see a bunch of head nods, and I'm like, who's gone through this as well? And everybody raised their hand. And I'm like, well, why aren't you putting stuff in to defend against this? And it's like, we just don't know what to do. And I think, that's why, there's a big education process going on, and understanding that, the traditional security approaches are important, but not 100% effective. You need to really outsmart them by taking in very disruptive approaches. And I think what Dell's done, and what we partner with them to do is to really take the data, air gap it, so cyber criminals don't even know it exists. And there's some cool technology, stealth technology, that even takes it off the grid, so it's disappeared. And then make sure the data has integrity. So the idea is that you can go to sleep at night knowing with comfort that you have quality data in a vault that can't be corrupted. And I think that's the disruptive approach, and there's nobody else doing this on the market today. I mean, we talked to industry analysts and other folks, and they're like, this is very unique, and no one else has taken the effort to do this. So I think it's important to understand the value of what this provides.
It's really interesting for all of us here on this talk today, because the one thing we don't like to think about or talk about is the notion that somebody gets a hold of our credentials. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you have threat management, whether you have behavioral analytics, whatever you might have in your shop. All the endpoint detection in the world is not going to do you any good if the guy that shows up with those credentials is allowed to be there. If he's allowed to be there and he logs on to your array and he disbands the raid groups, that's a problem. If he's able to do that on 5 different machines and do it to your backups, that's a problem. I had a conversation about 5 months ago with a company here in the US. I took them through a flowchart that showed how the bad guys go after backups and how it actually happens to folks. It's real. And lo and behold, just not too long ago, everything that I told them actually happened to them, right? Bad guys got to the backups, bad guys got to the disaster recovery copies, bad guys got to everything there. They weren't able to restore, they're rebuilding. It's a problem, right? And how do they do it? They had credentials. So, again, our message is the only real way to keep that data protected is Jim, is to your point, is to keep it somewhere where we can't see it, offline. We used to put all the stuff on tape, right? Years ago. I mean, I go way back, as you can tell by looking at my mug here. So a lot of tape, right? So today we don't probably want to do that. The more elegant way is to put it on disk and put it behind an air gap and make it safe. And that's exactly what we do with CyberSense and with the Cyber Vault.
I want to touch on a couple of points because I don't want them to get sort of breezed by. But Jim, you were talking about how people have so commonly like 75 security tools now, and that it's funny. There's always a sprawl, right? After something new or a boom comes in, everyone then complains about sprawl. We did it with virtual machines. We had virtual machine sprawl. Now we have tool sprawl on security, and at least one of our partners in the industry is trying to change the concept of security from being all about the tools to all about what you do with it. So they're not talking about SOC as a service where you're getting alerts from different tools. They're talking about security operations. And it got me thinking about that, even within the Dell Technologies portfolio, which is extremely wide, the cyber recovery solution is actually almost surprisingly an integration of things made by lots of different people, pulled together into an elegant suite, made simple and made effective. And it covers like the whole gambit of what you need to actually do the job, from the different software to go above and beyond to the hardware. I think the one part of it that I don't think is well understood, and it's always the basics, right? I don't think people understand the word air gap anymore. Like, I actually think you know, everyone thinks back to like the 60s where there were like two desks and the air gap was the seats between the two desks, right? I think when people hear the word air gap today, they think about moving into the cloud, or like they don't really get the definition. And so both of you said some stuff that I think is important that we take a moment, just a moment, and define the word air gap. And we define it, I think, in two ways. What gets in and what gets out and when, and what can get to it in the middle.
Sure.
So who wants to
I'll take that,
jump
Jim,
on
and I'll
that?
let you add some flavor. Air gapping from a cyber recovery perspective, from our solution perspective, is the notion of having a single circuit available to move changed data only, delta changes in data in backups from the primary backup appliance in production to a vault appliance. Now, there's some key aspects to this. First of all, beyond the air gap, we always recommend to our customers that the vault, as we call it, has a heightened level of security around it. And that's really pretty easy. When you think about it, what that means is if you have a rack with a key that gets inside and the machines that are in the quote vault are in there, then you heighten that security and have two keys, or you do key checkout. Not everybody within your IT organization knows that you have an IT vault. You have security people that are involved, and maybe one or two other people involved, and they know. So that's another level of heightened security. That's something we can do very easily, right? Now, as for the technology, we connect ideally in production, Michael, directly from one device to another, ideally with a piece of fiber, right? Direct connect, can't man in the middle, can't tap it, can't do anything like that. And then we secure it. We put a cryptographic wrapper around that tunnel. It talks to the cyber vault through a single unknown port. That unknown port is only used to bring data in and write data to disk, and nothing else can traverse that circuit and talk to anything else inside our cyber vault. That circuit is impenetrable. We've tested it through some of the best pen testers in the world, and you can't get there. What you can do is you can launch a denial of service against that port, but that's it. So this vault is basically offline, right? When it does go online, then we secure it. It's a cryptographically secure connection. Nothing can go across it except for our replication traffic. Once it goes across it, we write it to disk. And what we do, Michael, is we not only disable the ports that it uses, we actually up and down the actual Ethernet circuit itself. So if you can imagine, the vault is cut off from the rest of the world in the way of replication of data, bringing data in, until we run a job that's executed from the vault, and it says, bring the change data into the vault. We then bring up the vault Ethernet connection to the outside device. We secure it, we encrypt it, and then we pull into the vault the change data. Once we see the end of data stream come in, we're watching the data stream. Once we see end of data, we actually shut down that circuit again. So this connection is only online about, ideally it's a math problem, right? It's like if you have a terabyte of data and you can move it at, 500 gigabits a second, then how long is it going to be online? We do the math, right? So that's simply how it works. In that sense, bad guys can't get in, bad code can't traverse that network, bad code can't get into the vault through that network. There's essentially no way to get to our code or to our data that we're storing inside that vault from outside. We've been doing it now for 5 years. Believe it or not, we started this 5 years ago. Some of our biggest customers, are here in the United States, and there's some of the biggest companies in the world. And again, like you said earlier, Michael, we also have a school system outside of Wichita, Kansas that does it for K through 12 records, right? So it spans the gamut of all sorts of sizes of companies. But here's the basic premise. If we can bring that data in, lock it down, make it truly immutable, protect the clock to make sure it's tamper-proof, which we do by patent design, then scrub that data with CyberSense, make sure it's clean, then if you do have an event, we have the ability to recover instantly. Nobody else gives you that capability, right?
All right, so
Jim?
that gets me to the second part then, right? So what you said, what gets in something that is air-gapped, or at least in our definition of air-gapped, is we're allowing the replication of change data in. It's off-net generally, or either with a direct connection, or it's crossing a local network, but it is turning off the Ethernet after it's done, thereby keeping it off-net all the time. And it's only around long enough for that replication to get by, which of course would be a very high-speed transaction. I think that would be a real reason why this thing is kept at the production site, right? Because it's a lot easier from a networking point of view to be able to create this like direct connect circuit within the building if you're not having to cross a WAN or the cloud or the internet or anything like that. When it's right next to it, you can do things like, I'm just gonna wire up one connection, and that's all that's getting in. Just the data that has changed, nothing else gets in. Exactly. And then when we talk about what gets out, you know, we haven't really talked about what does it look like when you do a restore, but I think it's fair to say that nothing gets out until an event has been declared, and you have to physically do something that then connects two networks together to be able to push data out. But in the middle of that, there's a lot of stuff going on, like CyberSense operating, potentially restoring stuff to a clean room to make sure it's all good to go and ready to come back in. You know, that's all within the vault. And you also said something that not only are we talking about what data gets into the vault, when we talk about an air gap, we're also talking about limiting the people, that it's physically separate, that it's separately secured, that it's not the same people that would do the IT on a daily basis, that
right.
all of those steps are being taken to make sure, whether it's an insider, an outsider, or somewhere in between, you have an air gap, literally an air gap of separation. Did I say any of that wrong?
Yep. No, you're right. Us doing this for our customers is a joint effort between you guys, Michael, between Jim, with CyberSense and Dell, and our customers to actually do it. I'll give you an example of what you just said. I can't tell you the number of conference rooms I've sat in with IT and security people, where after everybody understands what we're talking about and creating this secure vault and housing that very important information, the number of times that a IT director or CIO has basically stopped the meeting and said, listen, we're probably going to do this, and I want nothing about this to get outside of this room after this meeting. So he's already chosen the people that are in that room to be the ones that will know and be part of the cyber vaulting, and the other 100 people he has in his IT organization will know nothing about it.
It's actually a really interesting comment. You know, it's funny, I think I've related the story before that in all of the time that I've been in a career where security is part of it, and you know, the number one rule has always been, whatever you do not publish in the newspaper that you are immune or just bought a big insurance policy or any like that. Anything that makes people think of you as low-hanging fruit, don't do that, right? So you're talking about how, you know, when people decide to vault, sometimes they don't publicize that. Not even within the organization. You want to have the crown jewels and vaults nobody can figure out because there's just no information on it. Jim, let me ask you, you know, as we think about the new normal of this happening all the time, more attackers, it's a growing commercial industry. What do you think? Do you think that cyber insurance is the new normal? Do you think that that's going to be the turnkey way for people to be safe, or do you think that that's already sort of been defeated and we've moved on to something else?
So, you know, when we do talk to customers and, you know, they basically say, you know, we know we're going to get attacked and our strategy is just to pay the ransom, go for the insurance and move on. So customers that pay the ransom to get the encryption keys back and then rely on their insurance, they become a prime target. They track these companies and they maintain lists and say, hey, these guys are payers, you know, so they're on the payee list. So I'm going to go after them again. So there was one customer that we were talking to and said, yeah, we were attacked. We paid the ransom. We're looking at other options. They didn't do anything. And then 2 weeks after we met with them, we saw they were attacked again. And then they reached out and said, okay, that strategy doesn't work. So we need plan B here. We're also, another interesting angle, we're also, with Dell talking to a lot of the insurance companies that are going to start to mandate these types of things. And we've seen FBI, we've seen Homeland Security, we see insurance companies mandate air-gapped vaults. So they're basically mandating what Dell Technologies is delivering. And the insurance companies are saying that, we will insure you, but you need to and prove that you've got these vaults in place. We're seeing also, there's conversations with credit unions that the organization that manages credit unions are going to mandate isolated vaults. So I think this is because it's going to become a requirement and not an option if you want to get insurance. Houses and have homeowners insurance that will protect you, but once they start saying you need to put in alarm systems and you need to do these things, and we'll discount your insurance. That's what's happening here is they're going to these companies and they're paying out. There was an attack across the globe that the CIO made a statement, hey, it only cost us $60 million. We were lucky about that. And if you look at what the insurance paid on that, the insurance company paid about $3.5 million. There are attacks that occur where insurance companies don't want to pay. There's famous ones that David can talk to you about, all those war stories. But I think it's going to be a requirement. And I think, the important point is that companies need to do it because they're being told to, but they need to do it more so to protect their customers' data and to be good citizens. And when they, to prevent the attack and say, that's why you want to do business with us because we're taking innovative approaches. But there's definitely a lot going on and a lot of change happening. But I think the forward-looking companies and companies that are really taking an advanced approach at this are the ones that are going to win.
So let me pause for a moment before I kind of pose the sort of the last challenge to us all. And let me just check with Jen really quick. Are there any questions, Jen, from the peanut gallery that we need to bring up?
Not at this moment.
Awesome. All right, gentlemen. So we agree that cyber recovery is a thing. It's the reasons for it are growing and are coming out of, let's say the invisible and becoming, unfortunately, very tangible. Dell EMC, of course, has this beautifully integrated solution, but today you have a DR environment and you just barely get that working, and man, backup is a pain in the butt and all of these things. So let me just ask both of you, I want to give each of you time on this. How do you get started? How do you start to understand you need to make a change, and then what do you do about it? Jimmy, you want to lead off on that one?
Yeah, well, I think, our product, CyberSense, which is really the analytics engine, is embedded within the Dell Cyber Recovery Vault. The thing that's been impressive is really that we see a range of customers that are deploying this. Dell has the services and the people to wrap around it. But the fact that, the same product can be deployed across a range of industries and a range of sizes, and it's kind of a plug and play solution once it's up and running. Our product is completely embedded in there. The thing that always surprises me is how easy it is because of the integration work that's done. You go into cyber recovery, you connect to the data domain, you create your analytics policy, and that's it, from the CyberSense side. The heavier lifting, which is in some cases not so heavy, is done on the Dell side, and there's been a lot of packaging, a lot of integration work that's been done for the past 4 or 5 years. And again, this product has been Dave has been around since the beginning. The genesis of it was 5 years ago now, David. But a lot of that stuff has been 5 years in the making. This is not something that was just cobbled together. It's fully integrated. So I think getting started is not hard, and I think David, you probably have more of the details of what Dell can provide.
Yeah, so David,
exactly.
Let me just also add to the question to you for a second before you get going. So the question is, how do I get started? I don't have anything today. How do I get started? And can you please touch on, because I didn't, and so we should, what goes in a vault? Is it just a total copy, or is there more to it? But how do I know?
Let me answer that question by telling you a story that you could take the same story, apply it to 10 10 or 100 other companies and it works the same way. So I did an engagement with one of the country's largest banks. Kind of like this, we spent actually, 3 hours in a meeting going through how this all works. And this bank is, again, one of the biggest in the country. Their security is really, really good, right? And about, probably halfway, 3/4 way through, the CIO and the CISO were sitting next to each other. They chattered a little bit together for a moment. Then they said, we believe that the bank security is such that we don't know that you're taking that, building another control like this and building the vault is something that we really would have to do. So we hear that a lot, right? We talked about that. So that actually really happened. It's happened probably 50 times. And I thought about that and I thought, well, you guys need to understand how some of these other attacks worldwide really work. And when you do understand that, it may make a difference. So I took them through a fairly lengthy discussion about the attack on Maersk and the attack on Maersk, not Maersk, but Merck, and on a few other companies back in the NotPetya days, and what we learned from that. And what I told them is, I said, the one thing that we learned from that, and what our customers learned from that is, the most important data to vault, really, when you think about it, you look at these new exploits like VHD and Wasted Locker and others, the most important thing to vault is, and start with, is everything about your network. Copies of dumps from Active Directory so you can bring back up your AD services quickly. Copies of DNS zone tables so you can actually do authentication and name resolution, right? All those things. We have a one chart slide that has 50 things on it that you need to vault because of a cyber attack. When I went through all of that, the CIO of the bank and the CISO chatted again, and they said, you know what? You're absolutely right. We need to at least put a vault in each of our major banking centers and vault those materials. And that's a true story, right? And then, so we went away, we started, cobbling things together and proposals and stuff. And about 30 days later, they came back and said, well, you know what, we chose to do what you call critical rebuild materials. Stuff to where we get things running quickly again, not all of our 150 banking environments, but the critical materials. I said, yes, that's perfect. They said, we want to add one other key application to that. We want to add our wholesale payment systems to that, right? So one key application environment and critical materials. You start, Michael, with critical materials. You take a look at maybe one or two key apps and you build the thing. You build the thing. Once it's built and once it's done, then adding the other 100 apps when necessary becomes easy. The hard part for most organizations is what's most important, because it differs depending on who you talk to, right? Everybody thinks their data is the most important. So what we've seen globally is people get all wrapped around the axle making those decisions, right? Start with critical materials, choose one or two apps, work with your Dell folks to understand how big this animal should be based upon the next couple of years, and build the thing. I can guarantee everybody that's on this call, based upon 5 years of experience working with this, that once this data goes in, it has never been compromised. So those folks that put it in the cyber vault have always been able to get it out. Now, you brought up a good question earlier, Michael. I want to hit that one more time. We've got a couple minutes. And that is, who does this, right? Who builds that vault, right? School systems, state and local governments, right? K through 12s. What did it cost the K through 12 in Wichita, Kansas to do this? About $25,000. They had a cyber vault, right? Wasn't terribly expensive, right? All the way through manufacturing companies. You probably drive a car, folks in this audience, probably drive a car where they're protecting critical data about intellectual property, about designs and things like that, or your car that's protected in the cyber vault we're talking about. more than likely through Sheltered Harbor in the future, you will bank at a bank that is protected by the cyber vault we're talking about, right? You probably get your pharmaceuticals from a pharmaceutical company that has cyber vaults like we're talking about. So anything from schools to government entities to hospitals, I mean, you name it, it doesn't matter. The idea is we all have that important data. It doesn't have to be, and the message is it doesn't have to cost $1 billion. It may cost $25,000. But the idea is, you know what, that school system in Wichita, I was there presenting all of this to them the day they got interested in really doing this. The FBI was there too, calling off their servers that very day for forensics analysis. And then we did a cyber vault for them, and they haven't had to worry about it since. They've been attacked since then, but they always quickly recover. You see, that's the difference. You can quickly recover. If you can quickly recover, that's all the difference in the world. And that's what this is all about.
It's really striking. You know, so what we're talking about is that there's this thing that people don't commonly understand called cyber recovery, and it's different from disaster recovery. And it is all about the last line of defense against hackers and aggressors and ransomware and all of these things. It doesn't replace the software to detect or combat those things. All it is your last line of defense that if they win, you have a way to get back very, very quickly, back to full production operation. And it doesn't matter if you're a small business or a really large business, or if you're a financial organization or somebody who does video game labs. I mean, it just doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is, if your business is down and you're losing money, you know, then this is for you. And to your point, David, it doesn't have to cost a lot. It doesn't even have to have a lot in it. You may find that your critical information, the part that always defeats you, you know, if it's just text dumps from switches and Active Directory and whatever, you may be sitting on a petabyte of organizational data, but the vault may only need a couple hundred meg to get things going. It's just, it sounds like it's a work of planning. If you can understand that you need the construct, you need this thing that no one can touch, then you do the planning work to figure it out, and it doesn't take that much to construct it, and then it just depends on the scale of it all. And it keeps you safe. And in this case, it's a solution that integrates automation and, you know, being able to do clean room operations and detect if you already have problems. And it pulls all of those elements in so that, you know, if there's that easy button version of what to do when you didn't win today, this is the little Staples easy button where you hit the big red button and you're good to go in a couple of hours. Does that seem right, Jim? Does that seem right, David? Is that where we are?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's the confidence. I mean, this provides the confidence that you know that you're protected, and it is, you know, it's a battle with very smart people that are getting smarter every day. So this is a solution that this works. It's proven. It's you know, constantly checking the integrity. So I think the fact that and you know, the famous statement is not if, it's when you get attacked, because you will be attacked. Is when you get attacked, you don't have, you know, heart palpitations saying, oh no, what am I going to do? It's like, hey, I've got a vault, I can recover and I can rebuild easily. And it's, you know, it takes a lot of pressure off, right?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting in the evolution of cybersecurity, at least in my world. It used to be that you were trying to prevent the passive actors from getting in. You know, somebody who downloaded someone else's code and just kind of uses it because it sounds fun. And you just wanted to make it hard for them, right? And then the people that were true professionals, you had to be either on someone's radar politically, or, you know, there had to be a reason that somebody like that was coming after you. And so the risk and the reward equation was easy. But with ransomware becoming a commercial business, the problem is it messes up all that radar, right? You can be somebody who's not politically oriented, not on anybody's radar, but you look like the low-hanging fruit. And so you're the target. And somebody who's making money on you is now motivated to get you. And that's a whole different basket in terms of how hard will they try and what will they be able to bring to bear to get it done. So let me just pause for a second to ask Jen if we have any questions out there.
Nope, we don't have any questions at this time.
I think we're at the end of our time, so I just want to thank Jim and David for taking the time this morning, and all of you for coming and listening to us have a conversation. And I hope to see everyone again really soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
Thank you.
Michael. Thanks, Jim. Yes, he's live.
No, it's I'm just watching. There's still one more person.
One more person is in the bathroom, Michael.
That's all right. I'll ask the Jen to.
I think you could force them out too.
Yep.
They may be multitasking.
They may be.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and end it, okay?
All right.
Bye,
We're all
everybody.
looking
Thank
at
you.
stuff. Bye.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
You guys, good session. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks, David.
Good work,
Take care.
guys. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Mike.